Thank you, everybody. Good morning. We'll attempt to be interactive here, probably towards the end of our conversation, so prepare yourself. We might ask you to engage in a debate that we'll have at the end of our conversation. But before we dig into our conversation, I thought that panel that was just on stage was super interesting. And I know, Gillian, you obviously have spent the bulk of your career building what became and is now the largest online travel agency in the world at Booking Holdings. How did you, at the time that you began that journey, was this idea of over-tourism even on your mind?
Yes, well, not in the beginning, because I think if you look back in 1950, there were like 25 million tourist arrivals. 2024, like 1.3 billion. So you see that there was enormous growth in the industry. You see that in some places that starts to turn now, where there's like too many tourists. And I think the industry really has a role to play here. This is not only a government's problem, and that's why the whole ecosystem needs to come together. Because if you think about profits that need to be reinvested into these communities, right? Because the cost of living is too high, and we need to make sure that people get trained for employment. We need to make sure that there's eco-friendly practices, that we have, if you think about infrastructure of all these people who want to travel, I think there's about 5.3 billion people that will have access to travel in the future that don't have access today. So even if we think today over-tourism is a problem, I don't think people realize what's coming.
And they're all going to want to see the Trevi Fountain for the first time.
Yes, and what we want to avoid, and that's what I worry about, that it gets too expensive. So how do we make sure that also these people and future generations can still explore the world just like we are doing?
Yeah, that's a powerful tension though, right? Less expensive.
Yes.
But manage the crowd.
Yeah.
That's hard to do.
And you need technology, right? So that's why we need innovation.
And are you, Mauricio, are you seeing any startups or working with any entrepreneurs that are talking about or addressing this issue of over-tourism and sustainability, or is it just not enough money to be made?
No, it's funny how a lot of the over-tourism talk comes from people that have traveled a lot themselves. So it's a little bit funny to think about, okay, now that I've gone to all these places, let me pull the ladder so that other people don't. Yeah. So there's, on the one hand, it's a result of, we all want cheap flights, we all want great airport infrastructure, but now tourists don't come, right? Yeah. So it's a result of democratization of travel, democratization of experiences, which before they used to be available to an elite.
Yeah.
And now we want to pretend like only a few people can go. So, I mean, last year I was having dinner here in Barcelona, and I was squirted water and told tourists go home, right? And
you were?
Yeah, and I started talking to the guy who squirted water to me, and he didn't even speak Spanish. He was Dutch.
Of course.
So it's like...
Dutch. Sorry.
That's all relative, right? I don't know. It's like, I have a trouble telling tourists that they're the problem. We have to be more imaginative, making cities more anti-fragile. Venice was never a museum. Venice was like a chaotic port.
Yeah.
So we need to be a little bit more imaginative.
That's great. So, all right. So, Gillian, I want to start with you. For those of you in the audience who don't realize, employee number 5 at Booking.com in 2002. So, imagine you had a great job. You were working in the hotel business. The internet had just collapsed with the .com implosion, and you get a pitch. Tell us about that journey, how you were found, what you went through, why you decided to take that risk.
Yeah, so where I was coming from is I was responsible for distribution of a big hotel chain. So I had to fill all of these hotels all across the world, which was kind of a difficult job to do. So when the internet came, I was fascinated how that could change finding and booking and accommodation, and how this could become so much easier. So when Bookings.nl at that time also started, and Geert-Jan Bruinsma was actually making money at the chain where I was working, he was actually building the system for all the loyalty points. And he was walking around with his plan for Bookings.nl, and people all thought he was crazy. And but then I thought, well, this could work. nobody knew at that time that it was going to work or that the internet was even going to be, was staying, right? So, yeah, but I thought, let's take the risk. And
did you push your way in? Did you say, I want to join the bandwagon, or were they recruiting?
Well, no, I think I spoke, the first conversation with Kees Kolen took 4 hours. And he really convinced me, but yeah, I also thought if it's going to work, then yeah, this is going to be fantastic.
So you call home and you say, hey, Dad, I've left my job and I'm joining an internet company.
Yeah, well, I got criticized a lot by my family by doing that. They thought it was absolutely crazy.
So you're then there for, you get on the ground, early days, you're there for only a couple of years, and this 2 or 3 years, and then this odd company from the U.S., Priceline, comes and buys your business for $133 million bucks. Did you think you were going to stick around at that time, or were you like, let me get through the earnout and I'm gone?
Yeah, so when we started, people always ask that question, were you already busy with becoming the biggest in Europe or the biggest in the world? We were not at all busy with that. We were just busy with building the best product out there. That was really the main focus, and thinking through how do you create a model to scale, because you can have a fantastic product, but if you don't know how to scale it, then you're still not moving forward. So. But the time was very hard in 2002, between 2002 and 2004 was very hard. There was hardly funding available. It was hard to get talent because people didn't want to work for internet companies, right? So you had to get people from very far away. So yeah, it was not an easy time, and people forget that even a company like Booking.com almost went bankrupt a couple of times, right? So, but then Priceline came in 2006, and yeah, it was a perfect combination for Booking. Because in the end,
perfect combination for Priceline.
Yeah,
that's
no,
for sure.
correct, that's for sure. But also because we didn't need to worry about funding, or it's not that we needed any more capital at that time. It was also the turning point where Booking became very profitable, and you saw the execution machine really working. But it did help because we could really focus on the business and becoming the market leader in Europe at that time. So I think in the end, it was a good combination.
It's such an interesting story of entrepreneurship and risk, and and now Booking, maybe the greatest acquisition certainly in the history of travel. Priceline's acquisition of Booking, now a $90 billion public company, $2 billion of EBITDA every quarter.
Yes.
I mean, just unbelievable outcome. Wasn't always clear. But and Mauricio, you were even earlier. I mean, so here's a super smart guy, goes to Princeton undergrad, Haas Business School, sharp as a tack, and then decides in 1999 to start an internet company in the heyday of the .com. So what was going through your mind? When that went down?
At that time, I was working in product development for Schwab, when Charles Schwab was changing its entire business model from a regular financial broker to an online broker. So I was having relevant experience. And then, as many people who were in Silicon Valley or the San Francisco Bay Area at the time, you get bitten by like that bug, right?
I was there.
By the startup bug, which you also were a victim of. And so we all became aware of the possibilities of trying to create something new. And so I got together with a friend of mine from Mexico who already had an idea of starting an online travel agency in Europe, and we decided to go for it. And we raised venture capital money in the US and in Europe, and then moved to Barcelona to launch eDreams. So it was as a result of being in the right place in terms of in the San Francisco Bay Area. I was having relevant experience. Javier was working at Netscape also, so it was a good timing.
It was a good timing on the one hand, but on the other hand, when the .com bubble busted, capital evaporated. And a lot of companies, and in fact, a lot of good companies went under, and people moved on. And I remember I was living in San Francisco at the time. You couldn't rent a U-Haul. There were so many people that were packing up and moving back to Chicago, right? So Yet you decided to persevere, to make the cuts you had to knuckle down, and that was a real risk as an entrepreneur. I know we talk about entrepreneurship as this game of risk, but how did you evaluate that time?
Yeah, well, we you know, as in every successful venture, there's luck involved. You know, you can also manufacture luck, but there's also casual luck, and we were lucky in the sense that we raised some venture capital money before the crash. But a lot of people had raised money, and just it's very easy to spend a lot of money, right? And so by the time of the crash, we were already operating in Spain, Italy, France, and UK. And what the crash gave us is it put us some limitations. All of a sudden, we realized that whatever we had, it had to be enough for us to be profitable.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes putting boundaries is great, right? And it forced us to not educate the market in terms of you need to buy online. We had to adapt. People didn't want to put their credit card online. So we had to adapt and build a call center operations, and then the market came. But we had to kind of consolidate. We closed a couple of countries. We consolidated in Spain and Italy. We became profitable there. And once we became profitable, we could do a lot more things.
Amazing story. And then ultimately, I don't know if people realize this, Spain's first startup IPO ever, and Spain's first unicorn ever.
Yeah.
eDreams. So those are really impressive.
And I think it's still the only one that makes money, which is a relevant item, right? Maybe others, I don't know. But yeah, the money-losing unicorns, there's a lot of them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We have those in San Francisco. So, you know, I mean, the thing I love about these guys is if you think about it, they're not only these sort of iconic travel entrepreneurs, but they were really there in the early days of the internet and were true innovators in the time of the internet. And we're now entering what I think is a new age as transformative, if not more. And the arc of change over time has been so fascinating to see, right? I mean, the internet, the digitization of content, broadband, that probably is a word that some of the younger people in the audience have never even heard before. But that was a thing that actually limited businesses and was essential. Then the shift to mobile, and all of these things have sort of created a new arc of what it means to innovate and be an entrepreneur. And then now here we are in the rise of the age of AI. Gillian, how do you think, when you think about these changes across travel, and you've seen it, having run Booking for as long as you did, and now an angel investor, an active coach, how has the industry changed over time, and how has the definition of what it means to be a startup founder changed over time, in your view?
Yeah, so I think a lot has changed, but if you think about consumers, a lot has also not changed. So consumers are still looking for trust. They're still looking for seamless experiences. They still look for the best experiences to create memories of a lifetime. So you see a lot is still the same. But if you think about how consumers are doing that, that has changed a lot. If you think about from a website to mobile, if you think about search, how that has changed, right? How social came up, even with Booking, you saw suddenly Airbnb coming up, right? So you have many elements that were changing. As an organization, you constantly need to think, how do I
And do you think that those changes have been driven more by demographic shifts, like generational, or by just the evolution of tools?
I think it's both, but I also think it's evolution of tools, right? If you think about a mobile device that suddenly travels with you, that allows you to do completely different types of innovation than when you're only sitting behind a desktop. But also for entrepreneurs, I think a lot has changed. If I look back when Booking started, it was completely different than if you're an entrepreneur today, right? And I think ideas can scale much faster today than at time with Booking, right? Infrastructure was very expensive, which is different today. So there's so many elements that are different. I think as entrepreneurs as well in the AI time, you really need to think through, okay, prototyping you can do much easier, right? So, but also focus becomes more important because you can go very wide very easily. So how do you go deep, right? So there's, I think, lots of elements are different.
And Mauricio, are you seeing the same thing in sort of the effect of this arc of change on what it means to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, totally agree with Gillian in terms of sometimes we get a little bit too distracted with the trends and with things that are moving and where things are going. When I think it's a lot more durable to think about what hasn't changed, what will never change, right? And what will never change in an industry like ours is things like trust. You know, that's the ultimate currency. Things like reducing anxiety, that's the ultimate, goal. Now, whether you do it with a lot of technology or with a lot of human or somewhere in the spectrum, everything is valid, right? I actually think that going way too digital has more risk. I think that there's a lot of competitive advantage in terms of creating the right type of frictions, and that's a bigger moat. So
interesting. So say a little bit more about that. So doing things with more friction creates a bigger moat.
Yeah, well, it's if I think about the competitive advantage that a big company like Amazon has in terms of trucks, logistics, delivery, it's a lot more difficult to. I mean, they have a very, very defensible moat, as opposed to somebody who would be completely digital and all of a sudden there's a new tool around that could replace them. It's very difficult to replace the extremely complex infrastructure that an Amazon has. And then as humans, we also want to create, some friction is very good. When you're buying expensive packages, you don't want to do it too easy. You want to have, like at eDreams, sometimes we called customers, and that created a lot of loyalty because they knew that somebody was behind. So we need to understand what friction is not needed, what friction is actually adding loyalty and trust to the system, and not get too overly obsessed by digitalizing everything. People, consumers care. Like if we think about B2C, let's try to address one of the capital sins, one of the deadly sins. I think there was Sequoia always invests in companies that address a deadly sin extremely well, and that's what we need to think. Like what is a deadly sin that we're going to enable consumers to do in a B2C? In a B2B environment, it's different. It's reducing fear. But yeah, some things never change, and that's what I think we need to be focused.
But I think what I hear you saying is that there are some risks in the age, this rising age of AI, that entrepreneurs will get too obsessed with just a completely digital experience or idea of a company and not realize that it lacks a moat. I mean, do you have that same sense in the companies you're seeing?
Yes, but I think the opportunity of AI and travel is huge in many parts, right? In the one
Do you
part,
think that this is the beginning of an era as great as the beginning of the internet?
I think it's going to change a lot for travel, for the good, and I think there's two parts, right? On the one part, there's the whole booking of travel, right? Versus the inspirational part, the booking path, that will change. I mean, even today, if you think about how search has changed, right?
Yeah.
Before, you would type in hotel in Paris, but it still didn't get you what you were looking for. Now
Well,
you can
you what
search.
you were looking for.
No,
They
but
all
now,
show up at booking.
yeah, but now you can say, oh, I bring a dog, I want to have a pool, whatever, and it gives you exactly the accommodation which is right for you, right?
Yeah.
So if you see already how that has changed and how much easier then the booking path is going to be, then if you think about end-to-end travel and making that even more frictionless, then I think, it's going to be fantastic. And the other part is the amount of jobs that are needed in the industry, because I think it's about 100 million jobs that we need in the future. I don't think we'll ever be able to do that. So I think also there we need more automation, etc. So I'm quite fascinated about it.
Let's pick up this AI search that you just mentioned, because I think it is this fascinating change from a keyword-driven
Yes.
world that certain large companies, intermediaries, could dominate with billions of dollars, with Google, who obviously own the top of that, to this now contextual world of AI search and where that leads. What side of the argument do you take? Is this a time that will absolutely transform distribution so that we will live in a world where the intermediaries will be much smaller? Or do you think we are in a time where the intermediaries are going to use this data and gain great power? And let's start with Mauricio, and then I definitely want to hear what you have to say.
I'll address what you said. I think that I never thought that I would live in another macro disruption like AI, right? I thought that the internet big disruption was going to be the biggest in my life or generation, and all of a sudden there comes an even bigger one. And just like that's a macro trend. The other inflection points that came was mobility, GPS positioning, all that. So we never
It's
thought
like we're in a Macy's in the
Right.
elevator, men's shoes, lingerie. It's like, okay.
So there's a lot of things that are going to become plumbing, right?
Yeah.
Like now nobody's putting email servers together. A lot of things are going to become plumbing, and a lot of companies and intermediaries are going to become plumbing.
So intermediaries as plumbing, does that mean that in the world of AI search, are the intermediaries going to win or lose?
Yeah, that depends on how they're going to execute. It's a very difficult question, I think. But I do think the distribution is going to change.
Yeah.
I think agents will get around also the legacy systems, right? Will make it easier. So I think it will change, and I think it depends on execution, right? If companies will be as successful as they are today. It's difficult to say if they will win or not, but they have a lot of trust, right?
All right, quick audience poll. Who thinks that the shift in AI search is going to destroy the intermediaries or weaken them? Raise your hand as high as you can. Blue smiley face, good enough. Okay. Who thinks that the intermediaries and the incumbents, given their mass pools of data, will just enhance their power? Ooh, it's a little bit more on the latter. That's quite cynical of you all. All right, well, I mean, look, I think that's an interesting prediction of the future. Before we end, and I want to just sort of wrap up with this whole notion of paying it forward. I mean, you guys have been, obviously, it's been a long arc through your careers, very successful. How are you thinking about what you do now? I mean, I know you've got some passions about diversity and engineering and so forth and some other things. And Mauricio, you're teaching entrepreneurship. How important is that for you as you sort of move into this phase of your life? And what sort of coaching would you have for other people who are thinking about that kind of value add in the world?
Yeah, no, I think it's extremely important. So I invest, I coach, and I still hope that I can add value, right, to what's coming next. And also on diversity and inclusion is still a very important topic. But
are these hopeful times in your view, or are these dark times?
No, it's hopeful times.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, I teach entrepreneurship, and there's not a better way for me to try to help the next generation realize the power that they have. Careers, jobs are going to be difficult. More and more jobs are going to be created by us, and I don't see a better way for the next generation to realize that they have their destiny in their own hands. And having them realize the power of entrepreneurship, I think it's a powerful argument.
It's maybe the thing that'll save the world.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. Mauricio, Gillian, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.